Hello, everyone. Thanks for making time and pardon the change in the schedule this time. I was hoping that Saturday at 9 might still be workable for some people. We can um, see if others might join in, and not a problem. So yeah, so this week we did some reading on family systems, which I find really, really helpful. And um, some of the things that stuck out to me is this notion of emotional triangles and how they're not necessarily good or evil, that they just are. Sometimes they can be really helpful. Sometimes they can lead to some problems. And a lot of thoughts on de-triangulating. The putting in effort to avoid or disentangle oneself from being involved in emotional processes and the anxiety of to others. And as Christian leaders, as members of a family, it's um, quite common for people to find themselves getting triangulated into other people's problems. And usually that's a position where it feels like we're helping, but we're likely not helping very much and causing more problems. I also really uh, thought it was really thoughtful the scale of differentiation. How it's not like, are you differentiated, yes or no? It's in, what degree are you? Maybe from a scale of 1 to 10, or some other different kind of scales. Are you more on the side of being fused with others, and being reactive, rather than remaining thoughtful and grounded? And I think I think differentiation is a really powerful way to see and even understand what's going on in our world and our country nowadays. I feel like when you see people, especially with political polarization going on in our country, and you're like, how can you justify or be quiet about all these horrible things that are going on? And I think a lot of it actually comes down to people aren't differentiated. They're fused with their image, this image of certain leaders that they think they follow, or want to connect their identity with. And the way to I think a way that we can pray towards is to help people become more healthily differentiated. You know. And another thing that and then I'll open it up and love to hear what you guys think, your reflections on this week's content. But the other two things that really stick out to me are overfunctioning and underfunctioning, and how in a system, whether it's a family system or a community or church system or whatnot, there are people who overfunction and carry their load and carry the responsibilities and load of others. Oftentimes, that's actually the pastor and the leader. And then there's people who underfunction, and example of that would be, if we grew up in a family or with people who had alcohol abuse problems, and it's almost as if, like, they're chronically underfunctioning, and then that has implications on the other people in the family system where there's this void, and oftentimes they will have to get implicated and pulled in to overfunction to compensate for the underfunctioning. And I find, and I think we might have talked about this earlier, but a lot of clergy and religious leaders have childhood history of childhood trauma, and one of the implications of that is that they were oftentimes the emotional adult in the family. And when we use language like that, it's suggesting that they overfunctioned. And of course, to overfunction, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It oftentimes means that you're the strongest in the family. It means that you're the most generous and the most caring and compassionate. Um, and sometimes overfunctioning can also have a dark side to it too. So we all know that when there's an alcohol problem in a family system, it's not just the person who struggles with alcohol, but the person or persons who enable it. And, there are terms like codependency, that might look like it's a good thing and they're generous, but they're actually reinforcing and a big part of the problem. That's why AA and Celebrate Recovery. I mean, they spend so much time not just talking about addressing the alcohol, but addressing the codependency. And again, that insight is so crucial, and it's very much informed by everything we've read this week about differentiation and family systems and stuff like that. So, let me pause there, and I'd love to hear, any of your thoughts and reactions to anything that we've covered this week or prior to that. And totally welcome to eat breakfast. No big deal at all.
Sorry, I'm also realizing our bath door is open. It's very messy.
No worries.
There's a hidden bathroom back there. Okay.
No worries.
Well, I sent like a huge email to Dr. Wang, so I have lots of thoughts. I don't want to start though because I will say so much. I want to give you guys a chance to say something first, if you
Anita,
want.
Shantice, would you guys like to jump in, or don't feel obligated, of course?
Um, I have some questions.
Sure.
So I was finishing listening to Anxious Church,
Okay.
and you're right. There are so many good thoughts and so many points of action in terms of self-awareness and digging deeper into your own family system
Hmm.
in order to become more secure in your identity and healthier in your own self-differentiation. So when you relate to others, it's just healthier. He ended with a point that I wanted to ask you about, where
Yeah.
he said it's good to disentangle from triangulation, but stay in it. Like, don't, I think I got the sense he was saying, don't triangulate, stay in a triangle, but while you remain connected, practice self differentiation so that it guides the whole triangle to a healthier place. I guess I was a little bit confused about stay in the triangle, but don't triangle concept.
Mm.
I'm like, that is, I don't think there's a single formula as to how to do that. Because I was trying to figure out how do I do that in my current situation? I'm like, I guess I'm kind of doing that, but feeling guilty because I'm dealing with three women who are highly, highly, highly codependent and
Oh,
stuck in a
wow.
deep, deep entangled triangle. And yeah, I think I emailed you about it, but I'm realizing, well, I think the course material is more than answering my questions, is what I could do to help two of these victims.
I'm not sure if I've got that email. So double check, because a lot of people send emails to David Wang at fuller.edu, but I have a C in the middle. So David C. Wang.
Oh, oops.
Or
Okay,
it
I
could
might have
also
emailed the
be
wrong.
or it could also be Dave Wang at fuller.edu. So whoever David Wang at Fuller is getting quite a lot of my emails, but
Oh,
so sorry,
okay.
that was not me. I didn't ignore you.
Oh, I'm like,
So
oh, he's
you're
probably
very
really
welcome
busy.
to send that again.
Okay. Um, gosh, like I don't even know where to begin, but I'm like, so the matriarch, the eldest woman in the thing, is highly codependent, and she was first friends with me and slandering the other two family members, and then they're in
That sounds like
relationship with me.
triangulation.
So I was getting pulled in, and finally I told the matriarch, can you not text me anymore? And I basically said,
Ooh.
you go to our Saturday small group, so I'm really busy with schoolwork. Do you mind saving your text messages for talking to me in person on Saturdays?
Sounds like a good example of differentiating, Anita.
Right. So I'm thinking, is that remaining in the triangle but staying connected, but
Absolutely.
not okay? Yeah. So I felt
Right
guilty, but
there.
then I was like, okay, well, this feels healthy because her text messages are so toxic and
Yeah.
so gossipy,
Yeah.
especially about her own daughters. Because I'm like, could you just stop with this? Because you're taking away my right to think for myself in terms of who they are. And
Yeah.
I go, I need to figure that out for myself, separate from you.
Yeah.
And so she
Mhm.
was really offended. Like, what? Not text message you at all? She's like, I was just asking how you were doing. I was just asking how the normal small group prayer requests. I'm like, I'm thinking I want to respond. Nobody else texts me every day like this, but I don't. And I'm like, you know, I just gave some simple responses, refused to engage, said, I'll talk to you in person.
Yeah.
And then that felt good.
That's perfect, and I think some of it is she's looking for that immediate kind of behavioral reinforcement, where she's,
Mm,
having a stream of consciousness and she has someone to just dump on. She's just
mm-hmm.
dumping on you,
Okay.
and but by doing what you did, instead of cutting her off completely, you're saying, well, I'm not opposed to listening to you, but here's some boundaries and let's do it face to face this one time a week, as opposed to, and then here's a reason why. I'm a student, this is overwhelming, so on and so forth. And you're putting boundaries, and you're also not trying to shame her. And
Mm-hmm.
whether or not she has a capacity to listen to your boundaries or understand or, have insight, I mean, those are all the building blocks of healthy differentiation. So
Okay.
healthy differentiation doesn't mean we cut someone off
Mm,
necessarily.
Mhm. Yeah.
It means that we can still stay connected. So to be healthfully differentiated doesn't mean we have to have no relationship with them. But of course, it depends on the other person's capacity. Sometimes we do have to end up effectively cutting off people,
mm,
because they just can't tolerate it. It's either all or nothing for them. And if they make that choice, then and that's also another common manipulation. I don't know if they're doing
Mhm.
it on purpose, but they'll say like, either I'm gonna, either you allow me to text you 24/7, or
mm-hmm.
that means that you hate me and I'm not a good friend, and you're not
Mm-hmm.
a good friend, and it's either that or that. And if they really draw the line like that, then I suppose there's not much to do, but you're trying to find that middle way. So I think that was an excellent modeling of, and if there's any hope for this codependent individual to move towards health, you're actually modeling it.
Great.
Whether she
Well,
receives it is another thing, but this is what you're modeling.
well, she received it and then dumped on me Saturday in person. And and it's okay because there's a limit. There's schedules, there's other people. So it's whatever
Mhm.
she's saying, she's realizing is there for public examination.
Yeah.
And she has gotten therapist. She's found a therapist.
Good.
Her daughter, who's the real victim, got a therapist.
Good.
And each week with her two daughters, who used to be homeless for 6 months, I'm actually going through a chapter of the week of The Wisdom of Your Body with
Oh,
Hilary
wow.
McBride. So
Wow.
I'm summarizing a chapter, going over the questions in person, and one of them is a rape survivor.
Oh, wow.
So I was emailing you going, do you have any suggestions or
Oh, that would
like,
not be an email I ignore. So please send
okay,
that one to,
I'll send
yeah,
I'll David C. Wang at Fuller.
yeah.
Okay, great. Thank
Or
you.
or Dave Wang at Fuller is, I added the Dave Wang to, anyway, yeah, so that there's more places to
Okay,
cover. But
thank
um
you.
and I'd imagine if she's willing to differentiate in a healthy way, a potential next step could be, when she does dump on you, that, once a week, for
Mm-hmm.
you to begin to push back a little bit, and
Mm,
um, embody this, like, hey, I'm not just a person that you dump with, and I agree with everything you say, and I'm just quiet. It's yeah, this sounds fair, and I'm not sure if I agree with this. And
mm,
can you tolerate the
Mhm.
possibility that the person you're dumping on may not agree with 10% of what you said, 20% of what you said? So you are a
Mhm.
free human being
mm-hmm,
that is free to have your own opinions, and
mm-hmm.
instead of someone that can be molded and manipulated to believe whatever to have to agree.
Yeah.
Because if you have to agree with everything she says, that's actually her trying to fuse you. be
Yeah.
fused with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am aware of
Yeah.
her tactics.
So, the next level could be, can she tolerate you not, agreeing with everything? And that'll be another point of, a decision
Mhm.
point for her. Um,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
this is exactly what this is about. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Shantice, do you have any thoughts? Don't feel obligated, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts
So
too.
when the quote that you were referencing, when I heard it, the scripture that came to mind was
Mm,
endeavoring to keep the bonds of unity of peace. That's like me paraphrasing. What basically talks about how when we have conflict in any type of system, we have to endeavor, meaning fight, to keep a sense of unity. Unity, I think sometimes people think it always means agreement,
yeah.
and that's not the case. I'm going to wrestle with you in a healthy way, which you did. Hey, I'm going to set parameters around how we engage.
Yeah.
And then additionally, like there's going to be some type of accountability. Additionally, you're going to seek by your own choice the necessary help that you need so we can stay unified, especially if it's pertaining to you guys coming to like a small group and prayer, like all this stuff comes when we're engaging with people. I think sometimes we fall short and we think when we engage with people that we don't get very human experiences. So people who have unhealthy relationship with their children, people who have unhealthy relationship with authority figures, and communication. So I love what you did and how you put parameters around people, because sometimes when people are so unhealed, they're just willy nilly. They're just
Hmm.
going off everywhere because they're trying to grab on something to keep them from drowning in all the frustration and emotions and trauma and thoughts. So they're just splashing in the water versus, I'm going to throw you this rope.
Hmm.
And until you can understand that you're actually not drowning, you can stand up. And if you can't stand, float. And if you can, swim. Like sometimes you have to kind of be that lifeguard that's like, I'm not getting in that water because you're not drowning. You're in 3 feet of water. But I'm going to give you the tools and point you into the right direction and help you understand. Oh, you can stand up. You'll be okay. So I love what you did. I think it was perfect. And I'm not sure how your group is set up, but if you have somebody who's also leading, maybe make that other person aware of some things that's going on in a healthy way that's not like gossipy. But so if they see her engaging with you, maybe past five
Mm.
minutes, they interrupt.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. My husband is
Just so
co-leading.
Oh, this is good.
just so you can, because I know when we care about people and we want to help them,
Hmm.
we overperform. So
Hmm.
even though you're setting boundaries, it's also within that you might have to set your own personal boundaries and understanding your limitation when it comes to how you choose to engage with the helping healing work.
Hmm. Hmm. I
Oh,
So
guess
if I
yeah.
would, because I have had to do that myself, like
Hmm.
where there's been, especially by me being a minister and a therapist, sometimes people like to pull on the therapist part of me when I'm at church, and I have to say, no, stop. I am not operating in the capacity of my therapy license. I am a minister
Mm.
at this church, and that looks different.
Mm.
But I still, as a healer, as a helper, sometimes I'll like lean in and I have to have somebody else hold me accountable because let's be real, I'm still human too. And I'm not
Hmm.
always as strong to say stop or nope or go talk to your therapist or go do this or I'm a woman. You know how we are.
Hmm.
And we'll we'll try to save and heal the whole world.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes I need somebody to be like, Shantice, you've been talking to her, that individual, for 7 minutes too long.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
That's a good voice.
So hopefully that helps.
And
Oh, thank
Shantice,
you.
I looked up the verse that you
Thank
mentioned.
you.
It's Ephesians 4:3, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I love it. And I'm sure
Yes.
it's possible to use that verse as a form of manipulation to fuse everyone, right? Like,
Mhm.
if I pull that verse out, it means that, you have to agree with me, and we all have to, everyone in this congregation is going to have to believe the exact same thing because that's what unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace means. And I think I love what you said. Unity doesn't mean agreement and conformity. I think
Mhm.
that's actually a deeper unity, a more robust unity when people have their own way of
Absolutely.
thinking and we're still unified. We don't have to conform to each other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was so good. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. That was really good.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, guys. Oh, Nita, I cut you off too. Did you have a follow-up comment or?
Yeah, basically, I guess I'm pleasantly surprised to find my husband and I as co-leaders of the small group are thanks to my husband being a super independent engineer who never feels forced to follow anybody. Um, when he gave the example of people that are 100% self-differentiating, I was like, oh yeah, that's my husband. I get mad. I'm like, oh, now I'm finding out I should be more like him. Okay. So I'm pleasantly surprised to find our small groups actually practicing most of the principles that are being endorsed in this class. Definitely not perfectly, but uh, it came up last week. We opened the floor to political discussions of
Oh,
national protests. I know to ICE raids and all that, and the schools being closed for a day. But because we're studying the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and I get to utilize my year and a half of Fuller work to try to neatly summarize 3 chapters of the Bible a week for my group. And
Ooh.
we said we want our small group to be the church we want it to be. And I said, oftentimes we avoid discussing political events because we're afraid of disagreeing with one
Mhm.
another.
yeah.
And so we
Mhm.
opened the floor and said, feel free to speak your mind. We have a little bit of time. Keep it respectful, keep it biblical, keep it confidential. And one
Mhm.
one lady who's Asian American, who is an immigrant to Ireland, lived there for 10 years and now is back in America, spoke up. She was very scared to, but I and a potential
Mhm.
co-leader said, go ahead, And she pretty much said this view is very unpopular, but I support what's going on with the ice raids. And we're all quiet. Like half of us in the room are like dying to say something, including this grandmother who I'm helping because she's very more liberal with her daughters. They're very anti-male patriarchy. And this lady quietly voiced her
Mhm.
opinion that if you follow the rules, you'll be safe. And if you don't, you pretty much get what you deserve. And we're all quietly dying here. And I
Mhm.
just, I gave a couple thoughts and we let her talk. And we gave a
Mhm.
couple comments, and I didn't even bother to respond because I'm, as the leader, get to respond with my opinion on the Bible summary each week. I just
Mhm.
said, hey guys, we have a First Amendment right to have freedom of speech. And I go, it's okay to
Mhm.
agree to disagree. And I said, I still love you here. And I gave her a hug
Mhm.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that's good.
to affirm, you don't know why somebody is saying what they're saying. But I told my
Mhm.
husband, I truly am believing with all the wounded souls God is bringing to our small group, the more wounded the person, the worse the theology.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Oh, yes.
let's
Oh,
Mhm.
let's
that's
not
good.
let's
That's
not
good.
rush to correct that grandma. And there's so many points where she's off with somebody else. I'm like, because we got to listen to understand what is their life
Abs-
story that they came to that wrong conclusion.
Oh,
Absolutely.
You
that's
know,
so good. Could you say that again? The more wounded the person, the more.
the more wounded the person, the worse the theology. And while
Mhm.
it might make my hair stand up and I'm like breathing inside, and I just want to point out, like, yell at them, you're
Mhm.
wrong. I think
I'm
I
gonna
was
write
telling
that
my
down.
husband, because my husband, when the group is over, will be like, this person. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think we should correct them right away. I think we should
Mm-mm.
encourage them to think for themselves and self-correct when they're ready.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Anita, I mean, next week we're going to ask the class to submit their case for the or case proposal for the final paper.
Mm.
And then in a few weeks, we'll ask people to submit their psychological construct proposal. You might have both your case and psychological construct baked in. If you want to write about differentiation with, some of these small group
Mhm.
interactions, that would actually be the perfect kind of topic we're looking for. Either example, the one
Yeah.
with the person texting you every day, or the one
Hmm.
with the alternative views about ICE,
Mhm.
and going deep into differentiation, and to explain and articulate what the rationale behind how and why you responded the way you did. That's
Mhm.
exactly the kind of thing we're looking for the final paper.
Sure. I have another topic in mind, but I am
Don't feel
actually,
obligated, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But thank you for highlighting that. And I am loving this class. This is very different from Old Testament 500.
I will be taking it next, so I'm excited.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
tough one. It's not easy.
Awesome.
Rachel, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I
Um,
know from our email, there's some really good, and in fact, I think we're starting to kind of head towards some of the directions the questions that you were
yeah,
asking.
I might just read my email since it's a good summary. Okay, I'll skip the first paragraph. I That's a different subject. So I'm really enjoying the reading about family systems, and this material, coupled with the trauma material, is helping me make sense of a lot of things I inherited from my own family. At the same time, the family systems reading so far has been far more deterministic about my chances for being healed or differentiated. Am I irredeemably effed up by my poorly differentiated parents? I assume the answer has to be no for a Christian. I also wonder about the wisdom of seeking to be totally differentiated from others as creatures made for community. I recently had a conversation with my pastor where we talked about a lot of things, but I ended up sort of saying out loud that I wished I didn't care so much what he thought about me.
Hmm.
In the idea that like your
Hmm.
opinion means too much to me. And
Hmm.
he said, and I said, I wish I just didn't care what anyone thought of me. And he said, it probably wouldn't be good if you really didn't care what anyone thought of you because God has made us to seek community. And that need to be loved and accepted is sort of a safeguard to not stray too far from community.
Hmm.
So I am a tiny baby in terms of understanding what differentiation means, but in some ways it seems a little more Buddhist than Christian to me. And that may just be me not fully understanding it.
Hmm.
But this idea of sort of being present but somewhat emotionally aloof, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, in the example of Jesus, Jesus gets angry, Jesus weeps, Jesus has compassion, and I believe I haven't taken Greek yet, but I believe the word for compassion is like being moved in your bowels, essentially, like this
Hmm.
bodily feeling of suffering with those who suffer. You know, my last quarter, um, we talked a lot about empathy and the importance of feeling with people. And so I really struggle when I'm
Hmm.
presented with these different concepts that seem like they might be contradictory to say, referring to our conversation yesterday with Shantice, how do I eat the meat and spit out the bone? How do I
Hmm.
incorporate the parts that are valuable for me, but not take this to an extreme? And I have a follow-up to that, but this is probably a good stopping point for discussion.
Hmm.
Yeah. Rachel, I honor where you're at in your life, um, and how you're wrestling. But I'm also reminded of, I want to say Jacob, when he was wrestling with the angel and just where he was at and how he was feeding his brother, Esau, and all the things that he experienced, all the trauma that that family experienced. And when he was wrestling, he told the angel, I won't let you go until you bless me.
Mhm.
And from that, his name was changed, and we know what came with all that. So I just want you to honor your wrestle. Like there's some things in this world that we just have to wrestle with. Like even me, I think we talked about yesterday how I wrestled for a long time with the idea like manipulation is good and bad.
Mm.
People use manipulation tactics out of a sense of survival. People use
Hmm.
sabotage out of a sense of way to get back to a sense of norm. And it's a wrestle. I wrestle with me being the type of person, me being the type of Christian where I believe God has truly gifted me with counsel, have gifted me with the ability to help others heal, to help people see their relationship as it pertains to being a son or daughter in Christ Jesus. And that's a wrestle for someone who is a woman of color who's living in a country that doesn't love or accept their beauty. And it's a wrestle, but I wrestle with it because I know it's so worth it. So when I'm finding myself wrestling with children who are being abused and parents who don't care, but then me looking at my natural father and my spiritual father and knowing I was blessed to have my dad, but I also was hurt because my mom passed away when I was younger. So like that's a wrestle that I wrestle with still. And some days I'm like uncle. And other days I'm wanting to wrestle. But I just I'm going to be praying for you as you wrestle with all of the things that we have been learning. And it's like we're learning it and we're moving on to the subject, so moving on to like the next thing so fast that I think what's happening is you're wrestling probably faster than you would want to.
Hmm.
I don't want to assume,
No,
but
you're correct.
that's what I'm feeling from you, and it's okay if I'm wrong. But I do feel like the
Mhm.
wrestle, like you're trying to wrestle down like all the things at once,
Mhm.
and I'm definitely praying for you.
Hmm. Love
That
that.
does, it does feel like that. In my I started listening to the spiritual abuse, and I was like, I don't know that this describes a church I was part of exactly, but it describes the house I grew up in, like exactly.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
And this
that's tough.
idea that I had to like have all the answers and that all my theology had to make sense and be fully contained, which
Mm-hmm.
mentally know is not correct. And I actually think I'm a creative person who really likes understanding like complexity and how things that seem
Mm-hmm.
contradictory actually go together a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Hmm.
hard for me when I'm in that place of trying to discern, when I'm like, I have two ideas
Mm-hmm.
here that both seem really good, but they are saying discrediting each other in some ways. So one of the other things I asked him about was um, enhancing the Christian life calls out Dallas Willard and Renovation of the Heart, which I was literally reading for a devotional I was preparing as I was reading some of our other stuff. And it's Willard talks about how spiritual formation is an inward and personal journey, but Strawn and Brown insist that it's not individual, private, or inward, nor is it correlated with an emotional state. It's a gradual process that takes place over time in the context of a larger body of Christian persons. I just met with my spiritual director this morning, and I was like, "Why is it not both? Why do these theologians feel like it has to be one or the other?" And she was like, "No, you're right. It's clearly both." But uh, it's hard for me to listen to people persuasively argue for something and say it has to be this way, and for me to be like, "Eh, I'll take it or leave it." Like it's just very hard for me to do
Yeah.
that. Um,
Yeah.
can I read you guys my next question? This will
Of
probably give you
course.
more insight into me. Um, I'm also wondering how differentiation might be understood for neurodiverse people. I recently discovered that I have ADHD, and it helps me understand how I found it difficult to pin down my identity. I'm constantly adapting to my environment and the people in it, which Strawn and Warren would say is a good thing, that we can't know who we are apart from our community. Meanwhile, my husband and eldest son are on the spectrum and have more rigid and contained interests and social preferences. They might naturally fit some characteristics of differentiation just due to their neural network processing, but they wouldn't necessarily have the actual skills of being fully emotionally relating to those in their network. So I often am frustrated that I'm so easily influenced by others. I'm also frustrated by how implacable my husband and son can be. And it strikes me that, I mean, within our own family system, we can work together and benefit from each other's strengths. But when I read something like family systems, I wonder if it's taking into account individual psychology and how, how anxiety is triangulated when you have people who are neurodiverse. Curious about everyone's thoughts.
Mhm. Couple thoughts. And I think I'll kind of work towards the more recent question. But I really love the framing of your earlier question of, is differentiation more of a Buddhist thing, where just means that we're emotionally aloof and disengaged, right? And this notion of differentiation is it's embodied and paradoxical, so um, it's paradoxical in the sense that it's somewhere in between, these two extremes where, one extreme is, I'll use family systems language. On one extreme is emotional fusion, or emotional reactivity, where it's like I'm so fused and undifferentiated with the people around me that I can't, if someone is angry, then I can't help myself but be angry as well because I see myself fundamentally as so fused. Um, so it's a lack of differentiation. But that's actually not the only extreme. There's also the other extreme, and there's, language and family systems that would, on the in the direction of, emotional cutoff, where I'm just so disengaged. That I'm not even connected at all. I think this is what Anita was talking about earlier, where, does it mean I just cut people off completely and essentially not have a relationship with them, and I think that's what, the Anxious Church book was trying to get at, where it's like you're neither not this and or that, you're somewhere kind of, somewhere in between. And for those of us who've read the literature on attachment, like we know things about might know something about anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. I think there's actually parallels here where secure attachment is neither of those two things, and you incorporate both, but not in the extreme ways. You're neither anxious nor avoidant. It's a separate substance altogether, and differentiation. I look at that in a similar way, in a paradoxical way as well. So perhaps and of course I don't want to build a straw man with Buddhism, and I'm only somewhat familiar with Buddhism. Though we're actually doing some research in Thailand with some Buddhist friends, so I do respect and learn a lot from them. But perhaps th that may not the Buddhist teaching of non-attachment. If we were to hold on to that too rigidly, that might lead us towards emotional cutoff, and I think that would not be a good example of differentiation. I love what Shanti shared about wrestling. So this notion that being healthily differentiated, it actually doesn't mean that I'm not hurt or upset or impacted by things. So um, it just means that I have freedom. You know, um, because if I'm cut off or if I'm fused, there is no freedom. Like I have no other choice, but to either feel exactly what you feel or agree with exactly everything you say, or I have no freedom in the sense that I have to cut you off, and that's the only thing I can do, and differentiation is in that, that messy kind of middle ground where I'm still connected and therefore I might get hurt and I might be implicated. But I'm not forced on the train, so if the train's going here, I don't have to go all the way. So especially when we have conversations about this with those of us, and then this might mean most or all of us who came from uh, poorly differentiated, families with some dysfunction. I mean, the answer to that question isn't, I'm just going to cut off my family and live alone. That's not the answer. And well, what are we going to do if I stay connected and I get pulled into this? And sometimes families don't give us a choice. Like to remain connected means that I'm going to get pulled in and means I'm going to get implicated, and they're going to try to keep pulling me in and I'm going to have to just keep doing boundaries. So what differentiation will say is, well, we don't want you to be 100% connected because that's fused and you get sucked in all the way. And we also don't want to be 0% connected. We're going to have to exercise a lot of wisdom to go, what's most appropriate here? Is it 50%? And honestly, depending on the dysfunction, 50% may actually not be a good idea. For some families, it might have to be 10%. Like, I don't want to cut them off because it's important to me, but I need to protect my children from this BS. And every time I hang out with them, I need a week to recover. And I can't function that way. So I'm going to have to just limit this to, the holidays and end the holidays. I'm going to have to get my spouse to um, set the boundary where we're leaving at 9 o'clock and no later, or right after. We have to. I'm negotiating this with lots of people that I work with in my private practice, and heck, I'm negotiating with myself too. And it might have to be 10% this year, 25% next year, 50% next year, but it has to be a ongoing wrestling and negotiation, and if we find ourselves overwhelmed, maybe we need to get to a lower percent. And when people pass away in the system, that might kind of change things as well. Yeah. So my slow and uh, circuitous way of getting to your final question, recent question about, well, what does it mean to pursue neurodivergence? I mean, differentiation and among those of us who are neurodiverse. I think differentiation is um, perhaps even more important of a construct, and a more relevant one. It's also one that might be even more hard to grasp, and so differentiation, I feel like, is not a destination. It is a process. It is a direction to follow. It's not some place where I feel like I've gotten it and I'm good. It's something that it's a direction that I commit to uh, in a journey that I'm in this journey that I'm on. And depending on the particularities of one's neurodiversity, um, there might be a particular leaning and vulnerability towards fusion, where I'm hyper vigilant about, I care too much about what other people think. I'm so mindful of, what people might, how they might respond or what they think or evaluate of me and my behavior and my actions. And other forms of neurodiversity might have more of a leaning or vulnerability towards cutoff, or, I'm just in my own world and I can't get my head out of my own world and I'm engrossed in it and I'm vulnerable to be lost in my own mental processes. So what differentiation then would be is it's a different invitation for different people. So for those who are more vulnerable to cutoff, then we might know that the way that we might need to massage someone, the way that we might need to reinforce and build capacity is to build capacity towards insight of like, oh, there's a whole nother world outside of my mind. And there are other people that I'm in relationship with that exist outside of my world. And I might need to take that into account in the way that I live. And just like perhaps for, in your case, Rachel, the invitation of differentiation might be, I need, uh, let's find a way to not give a shit as much about what other people think, and maybe there's something about that interaction with your pastor that I feel like it gives me the impression that he's emotionally mature, he's safe, and that I can practice um, being secure in a friendship and a um, where they can tolerate me disagreeing with them, and they that I can experiment with being more of my true self with them, whether or not I know what they think, and to kind of go through that process of experimenting what it's like to be who you are without needing to constantly be oriented and adjust yourself to other people. And this is a journey where we do it little bit by little bit. It's almost like a reparenting, and especially for those of us who are neurodivergent, where we know that it's not just a conditioned thing, but we're actually going against the grain of the wiring of our brains. We need to be really gracious and patient with ourselves, and recognize that this is going to be a commitment for a long journey. Um, but differentiation might be helpful where, when we find ourselves stuck, this might give us a guide on help us get a bit unstuck. And in your particular family system, it might also be helpful to think about over functioning and under functioning, where again, it's not the fault of any particular individual, but it just seems like the way people's brains are wired is you guys kind of cover for each other in certain ways, and some people might be over functioning and under functioning just the way that the neural wiring is set, and to make sure that uh, doesn't persist in ways that is harmful for people in the system. So for who are over functioning, we don't want you to burn out because you're constantly trying to do everything, and while other people and vice versa as well. Wow, what a thoughtful question. What are
That
your
was an
thoughts?
amazing response. I just tried to capture like every single thing you said, but I know I can also go back and listen to this again. But thank you so much. I mean, I think all of this is true, and I think one of the unfortunate parts about online school for me is that it brings up a lot more of that fear of putting myself out there and not being like, what is everyone, I can't tell what everyone thinks of me. We just hung up and Zoom is over and like I talked too much again and I said things that people didn't like again. And I don't know, I am gonna be 40 this year and I'm like, how am I still doing this shit? Like this, I don't want to be this way anymore. Just telling you guys the truth. So what you said was really helpful. And honestly, it is really the over functioning and under functioning thing is like feels impossible to manage because my husband and I are so different that I mean it's something we've been working on our whole marriage, but I just don't know the solution. Like we've had to just kind of divide up our tasks because it has not gone well when we've tried to like share responsibilities. I don't know if there's a better way, but I am humbled. Yeah. Thank you.
And a good enough way, though not ideal, might have to be good enough.
Yeah.
I have a couple thoughts.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Rachel, you mentioned, well, I'm interested in next week's topic on spiritual abuse,
That's
being
going
a
to be a big one.
survivor of it. And it took me years to come to a place where I was okay with saying, I don't know. And I think a pastor that sponsored me to go to Fuller, I'm going to introduce the word he gave me, which he said came from someone else. Antinomy is two contradicting ideas that somehow unite in the middle. And there's nothing that guarantees the presence of God more in our theological struggles than encountering antinomy, which is God is a God of justice, but he's a God of mercy. So how do we reconcile that? I am liking to say I'm formulating a new picture of God as a God who's never for abuse. Yet I had to summarize for my small group, why would he tell Hagar to go back and submit to Sarah when Sarah was abusing her? So I added the inference he gave Hagar a choice, saying, if you submit to me over this authority, you can face the abuse and I will help you to overcome it. But it was up to Hagar. So that was my interpretation. If we interpret the Bible making God the center of the Bible, not our understanding the center of reading the Bible. So I think when I deal with 17 years of spiritual abuse, there was a constant mistreatment of me if I didn't have the right answer, if I didn't figure out the right solution, if I didn't represent according to the religious leaders' expectations. I was systematically abused. But I think it's just been a breath of fresh air to come to Fuller and to interact with people where it's okay to say, I don't know, and it's okay to be wrong. And giving that freedom to people that I lead. And then what might help in terms of self-differentiation, if we grew up in a very set theological foundation, like to examine, to take everything we're learning in psychology and apply it to Jesus Christ. So did Jesus self-differentiate? And I think, yeah, Jesus self-differentiated because he repeatedly told the religious leaders, I'm only here to do the Father's will, inferring not yours. And then he didn't care about numbers. He didn't care about people's approval. He didn't care about buildings. All the things I know we Americans love to have campaigns about. Jesus didn't care a flying fig. And if you want to look at a healthy biblical model of self-differentiation, I think you could preach whole sermon series on how did Jesus Christ self-differentiate and how did that become a role model for every other major religion in a way, or even Islam acknowledges he's a great teacher, right? And then I'm not sure about the term neurodivergent. I'm not very familiar with that. But could we, like, if Jesus is self-differentiating, could we say Judas Iscariot maybe was neurodivergent to be sympathetic? And then Peter, maybe both of them had some form of ADHD or neurodivergence, right? And Jesus' self-differentiating response to both of them was letting them choose while remaining in caring relationship with both. He knew what they would do and he knew their issues. I'm going to say a lot of his 12 disciples probably had some sort of mental health issues, you know? And yet Jesus, it blows my mind that he allowed Judas into his inner circle, self-differentiating enough to say, I know who I am. I'm so secure in my identity. I can stay in loving relationship and let you choose with your free will without ever codependently trying to stop you from doing what you're going to choose. So, like, I think Jesus himself, when we re-examine scriptures, is the perfect model of complete psychological health. And we misinterpret him or we forget about him in interpreting the Bible or teaching it or whatever. So that's why I'm just advocating to many churches, let's just go through the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation, equip people in a more compassionate view of looking at God. He's always sympathetic, always compassionate, and might I dare say, always self-differentiating with us free will humans and staying in loving relationship with us. So I'll just finish with that.
Oh, thank you for all of that, Anita. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to reflect on from what you and everyone shared today. I think, and I don't know how much credence there is to this, but I've heard some people describe, the relationship within the triune Godhead as an example of differentiation, where, they're each their own person, but they're, in unity with each other. Um, I'll have to ask a theologian about that. But And and again, I know we're talking about how differentiation may or may not be Buddhist, but I do find some of their teachings quite helpful. And one of those teachings is they make a distinction between pain and suffering. Um, and they would suggest that pain is a normal, unavoidable part of life, and suffering is the kind of thing that we uh, is not necessary. It's what we put upon ourselves. It's what um, it's something that you can navigate. And I think Buddhists would say that it's you know largely due to non-acceptance of reality. Um, so for example, it's like, if, something, tragic happened, there's the pain of grief that is a natural and necessary part of life that comes afterwards. But then, that, the suffering might be non-acceptance where I'm like, why me? Why did this happen to me? I'm looking for a reason, and I'm perpetually kind of, ruminating, and it's like you're adding suffering on top of pain. So with differentiation, this is a framework, a tool that can perhaps help us alleviate suffering, the kinds of pain that may not be necessary, but that we impose upon ourselves by um, um, compulsion and rigidity. But that still leaves us with the pain that we still have to navigate, So even if I'm the most healthily differentiated person, if the people in my family system are unhealthy and dysfunctional, no matter what I do to navigate this, even if I navigate it perfectly, by virtue of the fact that they are people that I love and people that are connected to me, I'm gonna have to grieve that. It's going to cause pain, um, and that's not, unfortunately, not my choice, because I was born in this family and born in these circumstances, and these are people that I'm connected to, and they have a sinful nature. I have a sinful nature, and but with differentiation, perhaps it could um, what would have been a 10 out of 10 can now be a 5 out of 10. And sometimes that's going to be good enough, and a 5 out of 10 I can get through. And a ten out of 10 might be close to too much. Yeah. But I'd imagine next week's conversation is going to be a very interesting one as well, on spiritual abuse. It's optional, but there's the panel discussion that we hosted about a month and a half ago, with Dan Allender and Rachel Clinton Chen and Kate Wiebe. I want to encourage you guys to consider reading it, listening to it. Though I was actively triggered by it, even though I was up on stage. The
Mm,
conversation went in directions I have never considered, so I was revisiting all sorts of stuff with
mm,
everyone else in the room, live. And so don't feel compelled to have to listen through it or listen to any of it or listen to all of it. Go at whatever pace you feel comfortable and you think would be helpful. And next week I will also be traveling, so I was originally thinking of canceling live chat, but I don't feel right about making all talk about spiritual abuse and not having a time to debrief it. So it might have to be on Sunday, but I'll have to look at my calendar. Hopefully it'll work with more people too. Thanks for carving out time in your Saturday morning for this. And man, this is such a rich conversation. Um,
mm.
Hope to see you all next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.